This episode is a G&T Q&A episode, and please bear with us while we come up with a better name for it. We take your questions on all subjects from weathering storms to carnets and storage, as well as talking about assisting and treatments. There's something for everyone in this episode, and hey, it's almost Christmas. So sit back, grab some sort of festive drink, and I hope you enjoy it.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, Thomas! Have you been a good boy this year? What? It's a Christmas special.
I didn't know you were going to do that.
It's me, Father Nick.
Sorry.
Oh, Saint Nick, isn't it? Oh, I got it. I pulled it up. Sorry.
All right, hang on. Sorry, breathe.
God, I don't think I've ever made you laugh so much.
Sorry, I don't think I've ever laughed so hard.
It's a Christmas special.
It is a Christmas special.
I'm covered in mince pie crumbs. I finished my Baileys.
Oh, for the listeners at home, that absolutely was not stage at home. I hope that's not lost on you because you can't see him, but oh my God, that's really tickled me. Oh, okay, hang on. Oh, okay, right. Hi guys, congratulations. You're listening to the Exposed Negative podcast. Oh, Greg, happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Oh my God, I'm actually crying. Oh my God. Greg, please verify for the listeners, I am actually crying.
Yeah. Jesus, I didn't think it was possible. The man weeps.
Man. The man weeps. Well, the man is weeping today for all sorts of reasons, but that one is but a good reason. Greg is right. This is the Christmas episode of the Exposed Negative podcast. We're feeling incredibly festive. We're covered in tinsel, but obviously biodegradable tinsel.
And we thought that, to our dear listeners, we would bestow the gift of knowledge. So this episode,
it's free as well. So
yeah,
cheap Christmas.
Cheap knowledge. This episode, we are answering some questions which have been fired over. We put a shout out on our social channels, and we were flooded with questions actually. So we've had to go through and sit there and kind of churn through them. Hopefully, we'll get to most people.
And by the way, that made us sound horribly ungrateful. We really appreciate the Christmas gifts of the questions, and we can't wait to unwrap each one. Do we have to do
this metaphor?
Yeah, do we have to do everything Christmas themed? I mean, the thing is, this is coming out on the 22nd of December. You guys are probably sick of Christmas, and it hasn't even happened yet.
We're actually recording this in August.
Yeah, right. We are, beyond efficient.
Have you ever done one of those Christmas campaigns where you have to shoot it in August and you're like making it snow and pretending that everyone's having a Christmas dinner?
I don't tend to normally make a big deal over Christmas. Obviously, I've got a daughter now, so I'm going to have to, make it a big deal. But no, Christmas for me really is about just normally having 3 days off. No,
but I mean, like, have you ever done a commercial shoot where it's meant to be Christmas in the shoot?
Oh, sorry. No. Luckily, I've managed to avoid them.
They are interesting.
Well, you must come out and your body must feel odd because you're like, oh my God, normally, Christmas?
Yeah, they normally shoot them in kind of August, September. So it's
not this year.
Normally, yeah, not this year. Anyway, yeah, I definitely didn't do any this year. How have you been though? What have you been up to? I heard you've been spending more money on kit, which is out of sorts.
So out
Are you
of sorts,
okay?
Isn't it? Do you know what? That's one of the reasons I've been weeping this week. To the video industry in a whole, batteries, why are they so expensive?
Yes, you've gone down the promised land route of Velux answering all your...
I bought some window batteries. Greg, house renovations on the brain, hey?
Yeah, God, don't even start. So what are these Velux for?
Powering things, Greg. That's how batteries work. No, I have... I am trying out a couple of nifty different setups, and one of them is quite power hungry and blinding by the looks of it. So it turns out I didn't need anywhere near that power or the amount of batteries, but it's good to have more rather than less. But I'm doing some experiments. Over Christmas, and I think January might be quite quiet as well. I'm just kind of like just going, right, I got a month and a half, 2 months to really kind of sit and learn in depth some new stuff. And I'm just going to do it with trial and error, really just try and figure how these things work. It's very odd when you decide that you're going to try and light in a completely different way, because, I've been lighting roughly the same way for 15 years. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months. But it has been quite expensive. So I think £2,500 just on the batteries today.
Ouch.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? In photography versus like video stuff, photographers, I know we moan about kit prices and stuff, but actually I don't think we quite realize how good we've got it. You go into the moving image kind of world and things suddenly skyrocket, and you need more bits.
But generally on moving image productions, I mean, it is changing, but historically on moving image productions, you wouldn't necessarily own most of the kit yourself. It would be bought in on the day. No, and also absolutely. You would have the budgets for that kind of stuff. Whereas in the photography world, those budgets, especially in the editorial side of things, haven't been there for 10, 15 years.
If I turn around and be like, oh, sorry, have we got £400 in the budget, just me hiring a couple of block batteries? People will go, what? No. No. Funnily enough, no.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a slightly different thing. And I guess you raise an interesting point, because with the whole kind of convergence of stills and video, more photographers are having to buy video kit and going, what? Hey, what? Oh. Really?
Maybe, I think we should do an episode on this. That is a whole kettle of fish that I reckon we can stretch out to an hour.
That is. I thought for a minute you got your metaphor wrong, but no, that is correct. That is a whole kettle of carp. I have, because I'm still waiting for some new rig stuff, some new Black Friday purchases to arrive, actually. So by the time they arrive, I'll be all excited and can talk about them on the pod.
Is this the handles?
Handles, hard drive holders. Yeah, lots of grippy, riggy, kitty stuff.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Me and you don't really enjoy shooting video. Never have, never will. Actually, that's not true. I think we both kind of love it. But what me and you really enjoy about the video side of things is how many little bits of kit there are.
It's basically Meccano.
Yeah, this is it, right? It's proper. It's working Meccano. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's quite satisfying when you build a rig that kind of works for what you need. But yeah, the thing with video is it's the amount of production involved, and it's great if you can get a good team around you and what have you, and a client that understands that. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and you have to explain it to people, like how much work is involved in things. But no, video is fun when it goes well. It's different muscles, isn't it? It's different muscles you're using. And it's different because I think as photographers as well, we're so used to being a bit of a lone wolf and kind of doing everything ourselves. And when it comes to video, there's only so much that you can really do and concentrate on before it starts to have a detrimental effect on the end product. If you're expecting to monitor your own sound, be your own DOP, your own director, and your own producer, that's can be difficult depending on the size of the production, and actually there's a reason that there's sound men and women who specialize in that, because it's a whole profession in itself that's taken, people spend years working in. And to turn up to a shoot where someone says, oh, we don't really need a sound person, it's a bit like, oh, it would be helpful.
I had a brief come in the other month, and I said, this is how much everything's going to cost, and that's it. Do you want sound? And they go, oh yeah, we definitely want sound. And I said, well, that's how much my sound recordist is going to be. And they went, oh, do you know what? I don't think we want sound.
Well, they wanted a silent movie.
You wanted a silent movie? What are you going to do? You can't just put like a scratch track over the top. It's not going to.
What you should have done? You should have shot it in the way that then would make sense. So everything kind of at 2 times the speed in black and white, cut a frame out, have a few missing frames so that people move around jerky, and then maybe at the end just have a Finn title that comes up.
I like that. Or at the beginning, back in 1922.
You could have been doing the piano track in the back.
I should really just start adding the sound effects into this podcast and really heighten the production value of it up.
Yeah, well, I am hoping that you fully festive it up at the beginning with bells and, I want to hear Prancer.
I'll have to go. I will get in touch with the intro guy and see if he can add some bells in, maybe some whistles.
I'm amazed that you haven't lined up your Stream Deck yet to be, shortcuts for comedy noises. Oh God, I can see Tom's mind thinking.
I hadn't even thought about that. Great, it's a genius idea. That's a great right.
So anytime anyone says a faux pas, you could have a.
I do like that idea. I do like that idea. But I haven't done that, and probably for the good of the listeners.
Yes. Well, shall we? They're probably bored of us. Bored of us waffling on. Let's get our guest, but we don't have a guest. It's just us and your questions. So, shall we crack into the questions? Let's open the present bag, the sack under the tree, the gift bag. I'm kind of losing my metaphors here. Help me out, Tom. Santa's sack.
I've already. Okay. Sorry, I'm going again. Okay, right. Deep breaths.
Come on. We've got to rummage in Santa's sack. And
okay. Insert sound effect here. Oh, sorry, Santa, that's a bit close. Right, okay, so we are going to... so you guys have obviously very kindly written in. So the first question is from Paris Kerner. And Paris says, do you have any advice around self-confidence and discipline motivation when you're starting out in your photo career? Not everyone was going to have issues around self-doubt, but I think some may deal with negative self-talk, especially at the start. If you start to question your ability, talent, and compare yourself to others, etc., you might find it hard. Well, interestingly, Paris, this is a question in 3 parts, and that's the first part of it. So I think Greg's going to agree with me and say that when we spoke to Lucy Locht, which is episode, I don't know, 6, 7? No, a bit more than that.
Man quickly Googles it.
Yeah, I'm on the website. Let me have a look. So it is episode 9.
9.
Great episode. Really lovely and in-depth talks about kind of Lucy's, and all of our imposter syndrome and struggling with self-confidence.
Yeah, I mean, Paris, I don't think you are at all alone in having kind of questions around that subject, because it's something that every photographer that I know has gone through and continues to go through throughout their career. I don't think it's anything that ever you 100% get over. It's just something you manage and you deal with, and as you get more confidence, it perhaps is less of an issue. But you're always going to go through peaks and troughs in your career where you question the quality of the work you're producing or the personal projects you're producing, and whether or not it's really hitting home. And I think generally kind of the mental health side of it, the negative self-talk that you mentioned, and comparing yourself to others, it's just something as an individual, we all need to be kind of hyper aware of, especially, we've all found ourselves in Instagram holes occasionally where you're endlessly scrolling and you see somebody's work that and you think, oh, that's amazing. I wish I'd shot that. Mm-hmm. And it becomes really easy to compare yourself to others. But I think you just have to be kind to yourself and know that, for me, one thing that's always helped with that is if you do kind of find yourself thinking that, you've also got to think, well, that person is on a totally different journey to me. They're in a totally different stage of their career, and I'm going to be in stages of my career where I'm just smashing out the park, and they're going to be in different, at a different time. They'll be in a part of their career where they're smashing out the park. And at the same time, if you are looking at a whole feed of different people, it can very easily, you can think, oh my God, all these people are shooting all of this stuff and I'm not. But you have to remember they're each an individual, and that person might have shot only one really amazing project that year, or really one amazing job that year, and that's what you're seeing. But you're also seeing 20 other people who've also are showing their best work. So it compounds, and in your mind you think, oh my God, everyone else is doing really well and I'm not. But the reality is everyone is actually just plodding along on their track, on, you know, in their lane, getting on with it. And they are probably going through exactly the same as you, thinking exactly the same negative thoughts. And it's really important to kind of have a a network of friends and colleagues who understand it, who get it, who also potentially work in the industry, so really, really understand what you're going through. And hopefully, you know, this podcast is one form of that. It's a way of reaching out to people and saying, actually, you know what, we're all in this together, even though we're all individuals and we're all forging our own paths. We all share this passion, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be talking and sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing kind of ideas, and kind of being able to actually have these discussions openly amongst one ourselves. So I think that's a good question to start with, really.
Absolutely. I've actually found I had a kind of a sit down with myself. It was doing the exact same thing, scrolling through Instagram, and you endlessly scroll, and it's just like, oh, geez, everyone else is doing all this. Blah, blah, blah. And I deleted the app. Full on just deleted the app, because you can do it all on your browser.
Yes.
So you can do all your messaging, you can leave comments, you can like, you can post, all of that from your browser. And for me, it's great, because now when I go on it, you don't endlessly scroll. You'll scroll down a little bit and go, oh, I've seen some nice stuff. Onwards and upwards. You know, I don't constantly go down to the bottom and then it just doesn't keep going and going and going, because I don't think it's good for people, especially most people in the past year or so. You know, there's been this kind of small matter of a global pandemic, and it's been, ropey for a lot of people, and it's had a detrimental effect on most creatives' careers. I don't feel like it's a good idea as creative types to then just sit and think that other people are doing huge amounts of work, because that might be how they make it look, but they're probably not. You know, bluntly.
I think there's one. Your point about the using Instagram on a browser is really interesting, because there's a really good photographer that, if you're not following Paris, you should, on Instagram, called Jake Stangl. He's a US-based, San Francisco-based photographer. Kind of shoots a lot of lifestyle and travel work, really beautiful work. And he's really interesting on his Instagram. He posts a lot about, questions that he gets sent. And he did a whole series of videos for assistants, actually, which comes on to a question that we have later on. But aside to that, he echoed exactly what Tom said. He doesn't, if you're feeling it's getting too much, get things like Twitter and Instagram off your phone and put them in a place where you can interact with them. Because the other thing about Instagram on a desktop is you don't have to deal with the adverts.
Oh, good point. Good point.
And it's a much more controllable way of looking at it. I know that your question wasn't specifically about Instagram, but it's a good example of just little minor changes that you can make, which might actually help kind of you feel slightly better about yourself and your own work and your own position. But there were
absolutely
two other parts to that question, weren't there? So
yeah, do you want me to lead with the second bit? So the second bit is quite an open-ended bit. Do you have any tips on getting clients when you're starting out? Is it just a matter of producing personal projects in the area that you'd like to make the photos in, then reaching out to relevant peoples and companies and showing them in your portfolio? Yeah. Right, this is the third part of the question. No, here's the thing, and I that's how I did it. Greg, I don't know if that's how you did it, but I would assume that's probably along those lines. And I think that is a very, very common way of doing it. Obviously, it's not the only way. Obviously, networking and introducing yourself as a photographer who makes a specific style or something like that. But for me, that's how I did it, and. Yeah, what I do think, though, is that what a lot of people don't talk about is if you are going to approach, say, for example, we'll just approach a magazine, right? And you're starting out, you're fresh to this. Look at the quality of the work they already use, and don't approach them until your work is comparable. Because the trouble is, you don't want to get onto someone's radar if your work isn't, if you are just starting out and your work is maybe quite a long way off from where they would want to use, don't then make your name synonymous with that. Wait until your work is at a level where you feel it is, comparable to what they're already running, and then get in touch. because then you'll be offering something unique. You'll be obviously experienced enough to be able to handle anything they throw at you. Plus, also they'll be happy to publish your work.
Yeah, I think it's a case of, as you said, Paris. It's photographing the work that you want to be getting. It's a bit of a catch-22. When I started shooting travel work for clients, I had to make a travel portfolio that I knew was the kind of work that they would be after. But at the same time, you've got to add something to it that is unique to you, like your spin on it, because ultimately you want to be giving them something that they can't just find elsewhere, something that has your vision, your eyes. So yeah, hopefully that's answered that bit of the question. And the final bit that you've got there is, do you have any tips on how to survive when you're new to the industry and getting paid a lot? Not getting paid a lot, but living expenses are still high.
We got no tips for people who are new to the industry and getting paid a lot. You guys are doing fine.
However, I mean, for me personally, I know that when I started out, I was shooting everything. I very much kind of tried my hand at most things. I was doing news assignments. I was doing lots of PR work. I did weddings. I did all sorts of different types of photography, and in some ways that was really helpful because it meant that I had experience in lots of different fields, and I could kind of, put myself in most positions and come out with something. But also, it hedged my bets. So for one particular industry, then took a bit of a nosedive. For example, now, for example, if you were photographing in sports and there's no sports going on because stadiums are closed, then, it might be a bit, you might have had a tricky year. So being able to be quite diverse in your approach is generally quite helpful. So I think try as many different types, but try and maintain that all of them have something to do with photography. There's no shame in assisting. There's no shame in doing retouching on the side for other photographers. There's no shame in being a digitech, because actually all of those things, if you want to, at the end of it, be a photographer, are going to be useful. And as you've seen with when we had LS on a few weeks ago, there are full-time professional digitechs out there who are working every single day and are making a good living, and that is what they do, and they are pure professionals. So there's also other areas within the industry that you can end up and still enjoy it. You don't necessarily have to end up as a shooting photographer. You can always keep the photography for yourself and shoot on the side and spend 10 years doing something else. No one's ever going to take that away from you. So ultimately, I'd say diversify, try and get as many, don't be too narrow-minded with what you want to do. Say, right, I only want to shoot, and I'm only going to shoot for if clients are paying me X, Y, and Z, or shoot for these particular clients, because ultimately actually being more open to different situations and different opportunities will make you a more rounded photographer.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the thing is, I think you and I both did that, Greg, in the early days. And, I got to go and do some things that I would never have had the opportunity to do had I gone into any other line of work. And it's all because, going back to the Art Striber chat, I said yes, and then I figured out the problems. If you haven't listened to that previous episode, it's a real doozy. So give it a listen. What I would say is, obviously, going on to how to survive when you're new to the industry and not getting paid a lot, and living expenses are still high, is Greg has approached it from an income point of view. I would also approach it from an outgoings point of view. And this is going to lead into the next question. Absolutely cut your spending to the bare minimum. I got told years and years ago. I was actually having a lunch or a drink with a friend before lockdown, and before lockdown 2, this time it's personal, and we were chatting, and he said, how do you buy all the kit and stuff? And I was like, well, years and years ago when I was a student, I watched an interview with it was a billionaire, it was Warren Buffett or something, and he said, don't ever live within your means, live below them. And I thought, well, that's quite a good way of doing it. And he said, live like a student. And so for lunch, honestly, this is I'm going to wait until you finish drinking so you don't spit it out. But for lunch every day, I have rice and peas.
God, thought you were going to say spam.
Nope, I'm vegetarian. But I genuinely I buy those big 5 kilo bags of rice.
Yeah.
And I have broccoli or peas with them, and it means that my lunches cost less than £1.
Mm.
Way less. I have some soy sauce on it, some sesame seeds. I'm a bit of a chef, so little bits here and there. But honestly, I can put it on a timer, and it costs nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so over the years, you kind of go, this seems like a weird point to make, but you go, sure. But I've been doing that since I was 19, 20. I'm 36 now. The amount of money I will have saved will be in the thousands of pounds.
Probably enough to buy you some Velox, Tom.
Probably enough to buy me some Velox, which is how I've justified the payment today. But there's ways of saving money while still maintaining a high quality of life. And I think when people are first starting out, they are told by the photography or the camera industry, you need this camera, you need this lens, you need this flash. You don't.
No.
Bluntly, you don't. Most of us tend to shoot with minimal kit anyway. Really, really. And this is more if they ever invent time travel, I hope that I listened to this right back at the beginning of my career. You don't need the best. You don't need everything that's brand new. And if you're coming into the industry now, you're coming in at a great point, because there have been some massive technological advancements really in the past few years. For example, Profoto with the B10, that's a 500 watt flash that is, not far off the same size as a water bottle. There's been some absolutely bonkers kind of tech really in the past few years, which compared to when we were first starting out, it's really, it will really make life easier. Plus also things are a lot cheaper now than when we were first starting out because of the mass market.
Yeah.
But, when people are first starting out, just keep your outgoings low. Well, the way I do it is now, if I think I want a piece of equipment, I need to kind of really make a business case for it. And I go, is it going to make my life easier? Is it going to make me money? If it will make my life easier, but it won't make me money, I might get it. If it'll make me money, but it won't make my life easier, I'll probably get it. And if it'll do both, I'll definitely get it.
I think the other way of doing that is also keeping a list of stuff, say on like a Pinterest board. It can be like a private Pinterest board. That's what I do with camera equipment. I think, I might get that at some point, because I know that if I have a really slow day, I might start looking at it and going, oh, I really like that. I really want that. I want that now. And before you know it, you've justified it to yourself. Whereas if you actually just save it and then push it to one side, it's not lost forever. You've got the link, you can find it again, but it almost allows you to forget about it and move on. It's a way of kind of dealing with cravings.
It's a good way of doing it, to be fair. I have it in a to-do list.
Yeah.
So I have a shopping list, to-do list, and then on it you can set the priorities. So every time I think I come back from a shoot and I go, oh, that would have been really useful, I'll up the priority on the shopping list item. So it'll go from no exclamation points to 1 exclamation point. And when it gets to 3 exclamation points, that's when I buy it.
Okay, well, there you go. So then the next question, I think we've got this from Isaac Hest, basically was about this, about how tips for people who are trying to weather the economic storm. So hopefully those are kind of will have answered your questions, Isaac. Have you got anything further on that?
It's just very much about keeping your overheads low.
Yeah. Do your cost of doing business as well. Try and figure out.
Exactly.
I just spoke to my broadband provider the other day because, it's Black Friday. Suddenly there's a load of deals on, and I was looking at my internet costs and going, why am I paying so much? And then literally, after 20 minutes on hold, you get through and spoke to someone. They dropped my bill by about 20 quid a month. And
which
it's exactly the same service
is 250 quid a year.
Yeah. So, and it's something I'd just not thought about. And then, companies at the moment are desperate to keep customers. So don't be afraid to negotiate for things if you are paying monthly subscriptions, especially stuff like internet. They're expecting people to haggle. Not there's some things you can't haggle on, but lots of things you can.
See, interestingly, I renewed my insurance, so my liability and my equipment insurance, and I'm not going to give figures out, but I was insuring quite a bit of gear. Now I'm insuring more gear, but my premium has become a third less. Yeah, go figure. I was as surprised as you were. I can hear you shocked into silence. But at the same time, I had a chat with my my broker, and I said, how are you finding it? And he goes, there's a lot of people who aren't renewing their insurances.
Yeah.
And you go, well, there you go. That's probably why they've dropped it, because they want people to renew. Well, when they dropped it,
classic thing with this is if your insurance covers you for going abroad, at the beginning of lockdown, it's like, well, I'm not going to be traveling for work, probably for the foreseeable. So I just took that off my insurance for the time being. I spoke to them and said, I'll probably put it back on in 12 months or 6 months, depending. But for the time being, I don't need foreign cover. And again, cuts a massive cost out for your insurance.
I should take that off. I actually didn't even think about that. See, even we learn things here on the Exposed Negative.
So I think the main thing is, for most photographers, they're going to be worrying about their outgoings when it comes to rent and mortgage. And I definitely think there's been a lot of people in our industry that have been hit hard by what's going on and have been worrying about that kind of thing. How they are going to pay the rent, how they are going to pay the mortgage. Our advice,
which I think is very fair.
Yeah,
genuine worries.
And I think, ultimately, not to be really dismal on our Christmas episode, but I do think that this lockdown is probably going to continue into January and February. However, I do think that afterwards there will be a bit of a bounce back. There will be companies that are desperate for content, and there will be work going. And I think we will be in a position to start kind of really ramping stuff up again. And if, trying to cut costs is one aspect. Another way to look at this is to be like, I'm going to use this time, like Tom's been doing, like I've been doing, to look at other aspects of your business, look at other aspects that you can brush up on, skills that you can learn, things that are going to make you kind of steadier as an enterprise when we come out on the other side of this, that you can hit the ground running and you've got your systems in place. Just try and work on little things incrementally. At the same time, don't let it get you down. Don't think that you need to be kind of reinventing the wheel and come out of this with all the answers. You've got to do what works for you, and it's, everyone's an individual and everyone's going to be going at their own pace. But those are the things, really. Try and cut costs and try and use the time efficiently if you can.
Do you know what I've also found has been quite good? That I have created a gear database. I love a database. Ooh. But it has actually been really useful, because I've started using a new bit of database software, which I'm sure we'll talk about at a later date with a proper episode about it, because I'm going to talk to you in depth about it. I bet you can't wait. But I have created this equipment database which shows when I bought the stuff, and all the details about the stuff. Right, that's not the important bit. The important bit is that I've come out of it and gone, do I need that? Photographers, we hoard kit. I'm yet to meet a photographer who doesn't really have, a kit they don't need or don't use. And so for me, I'm going through and I've added a checkbox into it. And so it now is a required field. So I kind of go yes, no, or maybe. And so all the stuff that is no, I am going to get rid of. And actually, I reckon that's going to free up a couple of £1,000 of cash that's just sat gathering dust in boxes. So, maybe while you've got the time, spring cleaning is never a bad thing.
Yeah, 100%. So,
right,
next question.
We're really hammering through these. That's question 2 of 7.
93.
So bear with us. Right. Go on, Greg. After you.
So next one comes from Nick Rokes. I believe it's Roke or Rock. If it is Rock, then that's a great surname, Nick Rocks.
See, I actually know how to. I know how to pronounce it, but I'm not going to say. So, Nick, I'm so sorry if Greg did mispronounce that. Onwards.
Do you or Tom have plans to make a photo book? how do you feel about the idea? I've
You
actually,
probably feel quite good about it, don't you?
well, I've made a couple of what I'd call kind of extended zines. They're not hardcover books, but yeah, it's something that I really enjoy the process of. And if again, to point you to a previous episode when we spoke to Matt Martin from Photo Book Cafe, there was a lot of chat then about self-publishing. So if you're interested in that, it's a good episode to listen to. Yeah, personally, I think it's a really fun process to do, and nowadays it's easier than ever to just take the reins and do it yourself. So there's no reason why you shouldn't make a photo book if you're a photographer, in my eyes. If you've got a body of work that you care about and you think other people are going to find interesting, then have a go. Because the process itself will actually help you understand your work better. It will make you look differently at your work, and it will make you look differently at work that you are yet to produce.
Yep. For me, I'm kind of the opposite. Sorry, playing devil's advocate here. I haven't made a book. I don't really work that way. I'm going to create mailers and stuff for various things, but I'm trying to be a bit more kind of ecologically sustainable with my mailers and things. So I feel it's a bit silly as photographers to send out, say for example,
it depends what you're doing though, doesn't it? Because I mean, when I say make a book, nowadays you can make just one copy of it, and you can do print on demand. So it's not like you're printing 10,000 books that then 9,000 of them get pulped. Which
we're not doing the Alan Partridge thing where I'm bouncing back. No, of course, absolutely. I just maybe don't have enough faith in my own work that people would buy a book of it.
Never say never, Tom. I think one day everyone's got a book in them.
Greg, I didn't say never say never. You said never. No, maybe I'm just about to do a big style shift, so maybe the work then will work better. But for the moment, I'm kind of focusing on other things. Apparently, doing databases of equipment I own. Really fun stuff. Creative.
Well, we'd love to hear, Nick, if you've got any kind of feedback on that. If you've got any experience with it, please write into the show. Max Burnett comes up next. He says,
"Oh, Greg, this one's for you."
Oh God, loved it. Would be great to talk through your storage system. Everyone is different, so it wouldn't hurt to hear you guys discuss yours. Now, some of these have been edited by Tom, so I'm sorry if that wasn't exactly what you said, Max.
I think actually it was systems. Because I'd replied saying, "I hope you enjoyed it" or something, and then he'd said, "Loved it." That's I've missed my message out. Apologies, Max.
Well, you can take it away, Tom, because I know how much you love to talk about storage.
Oh, guys, let's talk about storage. Right,
he's rubbing his thighs as we speak.
I've got really close to the microphone now, guys, because it's storage time. Storage is important, right? Most of us have digital files, and some of us don't back them up. Not me or you, but there are some people who still don't back things up. And I'm not going to talk in depth about this one because actually I think we have decided we did have a lot of feedback from the shout out we did in the last episode, and Greg's smiling because he's really excited about this. But Greg does want to do a storage episode.
I don't.
Because
I really don't.
Nothing screams sexy aspects of the business than talking about hard drives. But, it's actually wildly important. So, I know Greg is a big fan now of the same sort of system, actually, after I've kind of maybe stressed on him the importance of it. But, we are big advocates on the show of the 3-2-1 rule. So that is 3 copies of your data, 2 in the office, 1 off-site. So what that does is that creates a lot of redundancy. Oh, God, this is such a dull subject, isn't it?
Sorry, was I yawning?
No, yeah, you are. I mean, unbelievable.
I think what Max wants to know is hard
drives.
Yeah, what do you actually use? I'll be quick with this. Quick fire. I use 72 terabyte big Lacy in the studio.
So I have a mix of stuff. I have one of those, and I have the G Technology 8 drive big bay things. Which are, they're all of my stuff, and I don't know about yours, but all of my stuff is Thunderbolt 3. So it's all really quick. I then have, I actually have 3 backups in the office and an offsite. Just because the thing is with hard drives, guys, bluntly, they will fail at some point. When, I used to give talks about storage, because, thrilling stuff, but hard drives will all fail at some point. You're never going to find a hard drive that's going to last you 40 years. If you're looking for that kind of longevity, you want to look at LTO tapes and stuff like that. We'll cover that in the storage episode. But, hard drives, when it comes to them, it's not a case of if they fail, it's when. And so what you want to do is you want to, don't buy the cheapest. I know it will be tempting because it's not a sexy part of the business. It's not really a thing people care about. They tuck under your desk and you very rarely see them work. The chances are, though, if you buy the cheapest, and they come with a year warranty, if you get 18 months in and it fails, they're out of warranty. And, depending on how you have your data set up, they could be gone. So, I use, and I know, Greg, you do too, because we helped set them up. But, we have them set as different RAID settings and things like that. And RAID, again, going to go into this in the storage episode, RAID is not a backup. RAID is is something that helps you speed up your drives or spread parity across a series of drives. So it is basically a safety precaution, but it is not a backup. Because if you look at a RAID array, for example, that is a single copy of data. As long as you have a single copy of data, that is not a backup. You need that RAID array mirrored onto a separate drive for it to officially be a backup. And then what I have on my desk is I have an empty 3.5 inch hard drive reader. And then in my offsite, I have a Peli case with some custom cut foam that has loads of different hard drive storage options. And then I will just pull. I have 2 drives for the year that I'm running. So I have my entire hard drive organized by year. And so the early years in my career, I still spin them up every year or every 6 months, actually. And the reason is because you're using Mac. God, this is dull, isn't it? I'm so sorry. I've probably lost you all by now. But I will keep, because I know there are a lot of photographers that have stacks of hard drives. If this is you, think about when you last powered those drives up. They're magnetic media at the end of the day. You can't just have them sat for 5 years and then go, oh, it didn't spin up. You need to spin these things up every 6 months to keep them kind of, feeling good. Not like boost their ego, but you have to keep them magnetized, and obviously over time the power of the magnet can drop off. So keep them powered up, and everything will be all right. But for me, I use loose drives as my offsite because they are easier to carry around. And the reason I do that is because at my offsite location, I have this Peli case, and I have 2 years. I have 2 drives my working year. So 2020, I have 2 drives that and one of them's a transit drive. So it means that I always have a drive here. So it is actually here in my hand. Greg can attest. I have a hard drive here in a case. And that is when I go, I need to update my offsites. I will then do an update using Chronosync. And we'll go into that again because that's an amazing bit of software. And I'll do the big backup. And then I will take that individual drive. And then I will go over to where I have my offsite backup. I will then swap it with the other 2020 drive, which will then come back with me to the office. And then obviously next time I go to do an update, I'll update that drive. So it means that I don't have to go to my offsite, pick up the offsite, and then go back, then do the backup, and then go and take the offsite. So I think it's quite a good way of doing it, really. And also using the 3-2-1 rule, it basically covers against most emergencies. If your office gets broken into or the hard drive gets destroyed in a fire, you're going to have a backup. It sounds terrible. And another thing that probably not many listeners are going to be doing is encrypting their drives. Now, from a technical point of view, I am not going to tell you on this podcast how to do that because I don't want to be responsible for any data loss because you're starting to talk about slightly more advanced things. But I will say it's built into the Mac OS. I'm sure Windows have got options, but for the one listener who's on Windows, you can use Google as well. Sorry, that was snobby, wasn't it? I'm sure there's 2 or 3 of you. With the Mac stuff, it's built into the Mac OS. I mean, I can't attest to Windows because I've never used it, but with the Mac OS, it is built in, and it is very, very simple and straightforward. But you do please read up if you're going to think about doing it. Read up and understand what you're doing before you start doing it. Whenever I buy a new hard drive, it's the first thing I do with the hard drive. I format it and then I encrypt it. And that means, for example, that if anyone, if I had, and this wouldn't happen because I'm a bit more careful, but say, for example, you're in a real rush and you have your hard drive on your car seat and someone popped your window and picked your hard drive up. If it wasn't encrypted, they could then plug that hard drive in and access everything on the hard drive. That to me is a terrifying concept. Imagine you've got a malicious car robber who's popped your window and has gone, I'm going to put all these files online. Say, for example, you're working on an NDA shoot with a client. That could put you in real trouble. And I wouldn't want that on anyone. Whereas if it's an encrypted drive, obviously it's a password only you know. If they connect the hard drive in, they can't get access to it.
All those selfie boudoir shoots you've been doing, all over the internet.
Greg, I'm more than happy to share those.
One other thing I'd add to that is consider, obviously there's lots of different storage solutions online now as well. I know that Amazon offers something, Google offers stuff. Some people use Dropbox, Backblaze. I use PhotoShelter, and I have done for years. So I've kind of got loads of my shoots are just there in the cloud, but also very easily accessible. They've got all their IPTC and keywords, captions and everything embedded, so they're easy to search and find, but they're also easy then to send out to clients. I occasionally will make a sale from a shoot years ago, and if I'm on the road and I'm able to just link them directly to the high res, it saves me a huge amount of time, and it allows the actual whole PhotoShelter subscription to pay for itself. And again, that's something we are hoping to talk about in the future when we cover websites. But if anyone is kind of interested in following that route and wants to message me, if they are kind of going down that route, I can send them a referral code, which gives you credit and me credit. So everyone's a winner. But yeah, it's a good. I think it's a really good kind of form of online backup to have something like that not only just backs up the files, but actually then adds value in terms of them being searchable and you being able to set up galleries and all that kind of stuff. So worth considering.
I'm not going to ask you guys to get a referral code. I'm just going to ask you to pay the money straight into my bank account. The account details are 00. Before we move on, though, I really do want to stress something else. Storage has never been cheaper. Good quality hard drives do not cost the earth anymore, and you're getting very good, reliable hard drives with very good, G Technology stuff comes standard, I think, with a 3-year warranty. These are very good warranties on drives that have really come down a lot in price. I will also say, because I can hear you now, there's someone screaming at their Sonos or, sorry, not Sonos, speakers, whatever. Other speakers are available. And they're saying, Tom, how do you keep your offsite backed up before, how do you keep your data safe? Say, for example, you come out, you shoot on the Monday, but you're not going to do an offsite backup till the Sunday. How do you keep your data safe? Well, I'm glad you asked. I actually carry around one of these, Greg.
Sorry, I've dropped off.
I did notice that you weren't paying any attention. So I have a little 2 terabyte SSD drive here. And so every shoot I back up before I leave the location. And that hard drive lives in my pocket. That does not ever leave my reach. And it's an encrypted 2 terabyte SSD. There's SanDisk ones that are very good. And they're all very, very small. They all fit in your pocket, a couple £100. And it means that I always have an off-site backup unless I'm sat in the office. But I always, it's on my person at any point. So people would have to burn me down or attack me in the street to get this. And even if they did, I still have a copy back at the office, for example.
Burn you down?
I don't know. It was a very extreme example. But, I would really recommend, obviously I know we've earlier in the podcast saying don't spend any money, but, data security and data storage is important stuff. And, I feel that a 2 terabyte SSD for a couple £100 is a good way to spend your money. And hey, look, it's Christmas in a couple of days. Treat yourself. Treat yourself to a really fun Christmas gift. 2 terabyte SSD.
Right, let's move on. The next question we have.
I don't think we went into enough detail there for me, Greg.
Shh, I wish I could mute your mic remotely. So moving on, the next question we've got is from Evie Abila. And again, I'm sorry if I'm ballsed up your name.
If when you guys write in for Greg's, if you could put it in phonetics, that would be fantastic help.
Evie says, I am curious about treatments. What do you put into them and what tools do you use to make/share them? What's useful to the art buyers and what are pet peeves?
That's not quite the full question. Greg's incredibly modest, and he said, thanks. Evie actually said, thanks, Greg. Amazing podcast, which Greg has obviously dropped out.
Well, we don't want to blow our own trumpets.
Blow yours from time to time. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you want to head in with this?
Treatments. Well, we did cover this a little bit with Jack Terry episode, I believe.
We did.
Now, similar to Jack, I tend to do my treatments in Google Docs in the slides section of that software because it's easy to kind of update it and share it with my agent so that they can kind of cast an eye over things when we're pitching. Mm-hmm. And also, it's very intuitive. I can access it anywhere on my phone, on my iPad, or on my computer. So if I'm not in the studio, I can still work on it. And yep, just I have a template that I've built and I just tend to use that template and drop in. I'd recommend, and we're hoping actually to get him on the podcast, Mr. Finn Beals, his new book, which came out. This is going to be very awkward if he says no, isn't it? Yeah, he's going to have to come on now, Finn. The Photography Storytelling Workshop. He actually goes into detail in there about how he does his treatments with lots of pictures and captions and step-by-step process. So that would be worth seeking out. I think you can pick up his book in most good bookshops. It's only just come out. Other people tend to use Photoshop, InDesign, whatever really you're comfortable using. I use something called Affinity Publisher. Now, this is not a very well-known bit of software currently because it's really just, they're on version 1.7, but it is run by Affinity. Now, Affinity, you guys might have heard of Affinity Photo or Affinity Illustrator. They are Serif. Remember the old software company? They're Serif. So, you might not remember Serif, but there was a company called Serif. And, they've bought out Affinity. Sorry. Do you want me to make this podcast sans serif? Font gag for you there, a little bit typo gag. Sorry, that was bad. Affinity Publisher is basically like InDesign. It is a desktop publishing bit of software, and you can. I don't know about the more advanced stuff that might compare to InDesign, but most of the time we don't need that. We need to be able to create layouts, drop in images, and I have a template, same as Greg, but mine is an Affinity Publisher template, so it has placeholders. So when I have to create templates, I go through and I go, right, title there, text here, images here, boom, 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 done, out, gone. And it is a really, really quick way of doing it. And the reason I use Affinity Publisher, and here might be an interesting, I don't think Adobe are ever going to publish this, sponsor this podcast. Do you think? Before I go in, am I going to get a thumbs up, thumbs down? I had an email from them.
Oh, right. Did you?
No.
Oh, fine. Okay. Well, look, the reason I use Affinity Publisher is the same reason I use Resolve. Actually, I really like DaVinci Resolve. It's a fantastic bit of software. But, I don't use Premiere Pro. So it means that I would be paying the full Creative Cloud just to be using Photoshop and InDesign. But for me, InDesign's not worth that in my workflow. I tend to do a couple of treatments a month. I don't tend to be living in the software, and I feel that if I'm paying that amount, I would want to be using it every day. So the Affinity Publisher is a one-off payment. And for me, it's an excellent bit of software, and it means that I don't have to pay the higher level of the Creative Cloud subscription. So it might be able to save you some money if you're only using Photoshop and InDesign and Lightroom, for example. Maybe look at coming down a level and trying Affinity Publisher. This podcast is not sponsored in any way by Affinity, Serif, or Publisher. Actually, that sounded like I cut that in, but that was genuinely live. Sorry. But yeah, I don't know what's useful to art buyers and what are pet peeves. I would say that people have a habit of making them too long. Too much text and too long.
Well, for a start, make sure it's formatted, something they can actually look at, like a PDF. Don't send your treatments in a Word doc.
Also,
Comic Sans.
Make sure it looks good. And also make sure it looks on brand. You want someone who can go to your website and gets your treatment to feel like it's a cohesive. It's all come from the one person. Everything's got to be cohesive. And we're going to talk about brand and stuff in another episode, because I think it's a lot of people maybe don't quite understand the importance of it. But that is a good way of doing it, making sure everything fits along the same side of things.
Yep. I hope that's answered your question, Evie. Moving on, we've got a quite technical one here. Sam J. Pete.
Yeah, at Sam J. Pete. Thank you, Sam. ATA Carnets. Do you guys use them? This is obviously not many people are going to be traveling that much for the next year or so. So apologies, if you're not going to be traveling, it's kind of really rubbing salt in the wound. But
not going to get. Well, I was going to say we should probably not go into too much detail of what he said about the trouble he got into in Uganda.
We will not mention that, Sam. We will avoid that incriminating story. But we've all had to do it.
he goes on to say that, I've used one of these ATAs for about a year, but they're about £1,000 for an annual one, and you can't change the kit on them. They're a hassle to do 4 times per trip. 90% of the customs people don't seem to care, and 90% of photographers don't seem to care either. What do you guys think?
For the record, for people who don't know what a carnet is, it's like a passport for your equipment, basically. Would you agree?
Yeah. So this is where Tom's database comes in handy as well, because when you have to put a carnet together, you have to know all of your serial numbers, what each bit of kit weighs, all of this kind of. Yeah,
I haven't put that in the database.
Well, there we go. See, right. It's a gift that keeps giving. This is the second thing I've given you today.
Wow,
my Christmas gifts. So having all of that in one place is really useful. Most people would keep it on a spreadsheet, but if you're Tom Barnes, you keep it in a extremely complicated, self-made, custom-made database.
Gotta love it.
But yeah, it's the annoying thing is if you, for example, if you make the carnet 2 weeks before you fly, and then at the last minute the client changes their mind, and it means you have to carry different kit, and you've already done your carnet, then in theory you can run into trouble because it probably won't be on the carnet, and therefore you shouldn't legally be traveling with it. Now, there's lots of different countries have different rules, and obviously post Brexit, those the golden slopes that await us, according to Nigel Farage, are probably going to have carnets all over them, like landmines. Yeah. Sorry, I'm maybe pushing the metaphor a bit far here, but
quite far.
Waiting to just blow you up. Yeah. No, so some countries, at the moment, most photographers, if you're traveling in Europe, you might never have even had to have done a carnet. I've only done them once or twice. I remember having to do one for Belarus, and turning up to the airport, because you need to turn up to the airport how many hours ahead of your flight, because you need to get it signed. And wonderfully, the carnet office at Heathrow, or the customs office at Heathrow, only opens at 6:30 in the morning, and our flight, I think, was at 7. And the guy kind of turned up. What's this? Okay, yeah, I'll get around to it. Very helpful. Nearly missed my flight. Quite stressful. Then you land the other side, and you need to get it signed out of the airport. And then when you finish your job and you come back to the airport, again, you need to get it signed into the airport, and you fly back to your host country, and you need to get it signed back into that country. So they are a massive faff. Basically.
I've never done them.
You've never done them? Yeah, I mean, most photographers don't, because quite a lot of places nowadays, unless you're traveling, the reason we did on the Belarus job was I was traveling with, Peli cases full of lighting kit that I didn't think I was going to be able to get out there. Mm-hmm. I knew I'd been speaking to my local assistants on the ground, and I knew what we'd been able to acquire hiring wise, but so much of the kit was just unavailable. So I had to take my own. And yeah, it was a pain in the ass. And we got out the airport and we immediately got pulled over by the police, and they tried to elicit a bribe out of us for speeding, even though we'd literally just left the airport, about 100 meters down the road. So, and the reason being was probably because they saw us going through customs with all our kit and went, some rich foreigners there. Mm-hmm. We'll just wait for them to leave the airport and then pull them over. Yep. So it can make you a bit of a target, actually, having a carnet as well. It certainly draws attention.
Which is why...
Go on.
No, I was just going to say, when I... if I travel and I know it's going to be a light, I might not need to take a ton of Pelis or something like that. I'll quite often buy a cheap overbag to put the Peli in. Because I think a lot of the times people will kind of see hard, big Peli cases and go, ooh. Like much as though we do. Whenever we see someone pulling a Peli case, we go, well, it's a 1510, probably Digi, I reckon.
Speak for yourself.
But also, don't. I've got my logo sprayed on my cases, but if you don't know what that is, you'll just think it's an apostrophe and a 13. There's which is my lucky number in case you're asking. But don't ever put your job, or don't ever put your I think kind of websites and things like that. People will Google it and they'll be like, well, that's probably cameras. I'm going to have that.
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends where you're working, doesn't it? I mean, I have a phone number on the outside of my case just in case it goes missing in the airport. I've had flights where luggage has gone AWOL, and in the middle of a production. We did one a few years ago, and we had something like 15 flights in 14 days, and we got to Joburg, missed a flight, and it meant that our cases had been loaded onto the plane and then taken off the plane, and no one knew where they were. So for 24 hours, we were struggling trying to figure out how to get onwards to Tokyo and figure out where our cases were. And I feel there might have been a Benjamin or two that got slipped under, towards somebody to help smooth the wheels of us finding our kit.
Here's the argument, and this is why I'm now looking, when I get traveling again, I'm going to be looking at putting GPS transmitters in some of my cases. Because obviously that would be quite nice to know exactly where they are. What I will say is
better and better, those kind of things,
and smaller, and the battery life is getting much better. When you say that your kit went missing like that, when I was doing a shoot a few years ago in France, we were getting the train down from Paris, and we were in Charles de Gaulle. No, not Charles de Gaulle. What's the main?
Gare du Nord.
Sorry. Gare du Nord. And we just got on the train, and the door was just shutting, and some guy ran off the platform, grabbed my big Peli case, thinking it was obviously really light, because I don't know, the listeners probably don't know, but I'm super strong. So when I pick up a really heavy Peli case, I make it, well, and also I do this to make sure people don't think I'm overloading overhead bins and things like that. But he picked it up and it fell on him because it was so heavy, and it landed on his leg and it really hurt his ankle. And he basically then ran away, realizing he couldn't run with this massive case, as we chased him down the platform.
Yeah, and battered him to death with the Peli case.
The police took him and everything was good. It did shake me up a little bit though, because I've never really had anything. We were sat right by the case.
And that's why Tom now always travels with the case handcuffed to his wrist.
I do. I kind of have that kind of spy vibe going on. No, I've actually installed, and if you are listening at an airport security staff, this is not the case. This is for the sake of a joke. I have installed the blades handles on all my cases. So if it's not my hand, it rotates after a timer and cuts the hand off. And also, if you're one of my assistants and you're listening to this, don't worry, that's also not the case.
Not the case. Mr. Pun there. Yeah. Mr. Pun.
No, I knew.
Okay. So hopefully, Sam, that's kind of answered your... Well, no, it's not really answered your question.
It's made it humorous. humorous take on the question.
I think we will do more on this. We probably will need to get somebody on who knows a bit more about carnets than we do, in terms of, especially, we are probably going to do a Brexit episode because next year, because once, at the moment there's no point doing one because no one actually knows what's going on and what deal or not, no deal or Noel Edmonds or whatever is going to come out.
Well, interestingly, by the time this podcast comes out, we will know, probably, because it'll be the 22nd of December.
Yeah, probably not.
But let's keep it let's keep it lighthearted because again,
so we may cover that basically because after Brexit we may all need to know more about carnets. Next question, Callum Howard.
Do you want me to read this one?
Yeah, go for it.
Hey guys, I'm a regular listener and really enjoy the techie talk and laughs on the show. So clearly he's listening to a different podcast. Greg, your work has been a regular source of inspiration.
Oh, that's why you're doing it.
Just Greg then. Callum, just Greg. Terrible. Unbelievable. Well, and on that bombshell, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Oh, right. I'll read it. What advice could you give to graduates trying to get into assisting during the current COVID situation in the UK? Ooh. For context, I've just graduated from a photography degree and have been sending out emails regularly, and understandably so, many responses are that practitioners don't have the work or are using well-established assistants instead. It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that. I had a few people that were meant to be coming to the studio in the summer who emailed, and then, everything happened. And I was like, well, you can come in, but I'm not in the studio because we're in lockdown. And when I did start going back to the studio, even then it didn't seem, I share the studio, but we have kind of limited number of people in there so that it's a safe space to work. The idea of bringing in other people, for working days just would have complicated things, unfortunately. So it is difficult, I think, because he does go on to say, as an alternative question, because assisting seems like a long shot currently, what would you do to try and gain more experience in the industry during this current time? I'd say that's a pertinent question because ultimately that's, if you're not going to be getting the assisting, which, there are assisting gigs going out there, but not as many as normal. And so the reality is most photographers are probably going to be looking to, as he picked up on, hire someone they know rather than take a punt on somebody new. I think with assisting, generally, if it was me looking to assist with a photographer, I would always offer up my services to that photographer for the first time, for the first job at least, for free if I wasn't that experienced with assisting. If I was an experienced assistant, then of course you charge straight off. But if you've never, you've only assisted one or two photographers and you're looking to get into it, at least have a pre-meeting with them. I always try and meet potential assistants beforehand just to go through my kit bag, because there's no point getting someone along on a shoot who doesn't know how your kit's packed, because that's the most basic thing. And ultimately, like, if as a photographer, if you're on a stressful shoot, you don't want to be having to keep an eye out for somebody you've not worked with, because it's just another distraction, it's another stress. So again, if I'm using as an assistant for the first time, what I might do is use them alongside an assistant that I worked with and already know, so that they can be the ones that kind of can also help keep an eye on them. So your first assistant basically looks after your second.
Yeah, because I think it's something we don't tend to talk about that much. Is actually, obviously fantastic if someone's kind of really kind of enthusiastic and really want to be out in the world and on shoots and stuff. It is great. At the same time, there's so many things normally going on that we don't want to be hand-holding anyone. And I think when photographers get to a certain level, the opportunities to work with them become fewer and fewer, because it can be a liability. You don't want, anyone dropping a bit of kit they've never used or split second, and you kind of go, oh, look, I really need to change lens quickly, chuck me the 50, and if they go, where is that, or pass you the wrong lens, that is eating into valuable time. Say, for example, you've only got the subject for 2 or 3 minutes, that can feel like an eternity. So
I think one other thing actually to say at this point, Callum, is if you haven't listened to the episode with Dan Ross, give that one a listen. Dan is a successful photographer, but he spent many years assisting and was for a time kind of an incredibly busy assistant in London,
Mhm.
traveling all over the place. And that's a great episode. There should be some insights in that. But I'd also say that you've kind of answered your own question, because ultimately, if you're not going to be getting assistant work right now, then there are things that you can be doing. There's loads of stuff that you can be educating yourself on from a practical point of view. But also, I'm kind of amazed sometimes when we get graduates coming, fresh out of a degree course that come on a shoot, just how much they still need to learn, still how much there is still to learn about kind of the actual photographic industry and how it works. And I understand obviously that there's only so many things that a course can teach you, but there's plenty of information out there to be found. I think it's always hard because you don't know what you don't know. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not anyone's fault. But I think, there's a lot. Photography courses in the UK have a lot to answer for in terms of actually what kind of information they are giving their graduates and on the realities of work. I mean, I know some of them are much better courses than others. But I'd say go out and try and just find as much information, read up on stuff around just taking pictures and around just the technical side of things. Try and understand the actual business side of things, because it does make a massive difference.
Well, and also, there's never been so much information available. When people say, "Oh, I'm thinking about going studying photography," I'm like, don't put yourself through the debt, etc. But go on YouTube and say, for example, like you want to learn about a certain light, and you want to learn it really in depth. There's a channel, for example, called Gaffer and Gear, and it's a very nice Australian chap who runs you through really practical advice and information about various bits of equipment. I started watching his stuff a couple of weeks ago, and it's really informed two of my recent purchases. He really knows his stuff, and you pick up a lot. It is, yeah, Gaffer and Gear.
We'll link to that in the show notes then.
Yeah, he's really good, and there's loads of channels like that.
Another one actually. Jake Stangl, who I mentioned earlier, he did one the other day, it's quite long. It's about 2 or 3 hours. And again, it's on YouTube. It's either on YouTube or IGTV, but he talks through everything that you would need to know just starting out as an assistant. So literally we'll walk you through each stand and say, this is a big boy, this is a wind up, this is a whatever. Of course, a lot of them have different names to what they have in the UK, different nicknames, but it's still worth watching because he'll tell you which way you should correctly tighten the nut on a C-stand so it doesn't undo itself, how to use sandbags correctly, all of that kind of stuff. So there's information out there like that, which is really worth going and having a watch. And again, I know I bang on about it, but I've got a kit video for my lighting bag online on YouTube.
Greg? You've never mentioned it.
And that's probably worth going and looking at just to get a sense of, like, if you were to work for me, I'd ask you to watch that before you came along, because it was the type of thing that then talks you through why that bit of kit is where it is, how it's best used, etc., why it's marked that way. So there's loads of information out there like that. And that's the kind of stuff that you can be looking at and absorbing, so that when we get through to the other side of this, you're in a position and you're fired up and you're enthusiastic and you know how to approach people and you know what they're after. Because you kind of need to know it's a bit like trying to get work in front of an art buyer or a picture editor. You kind of have to know what they're looking for and approach them in the right way. And it's the same if you're an assistant looking to work with a photographer. Photographers are a mixed bag. Some are going to get back to you on the first email. Some are going to ignore all your emails. Some are going to be super organized and know their diary for months ahead. And some are going to be super last minute and call you the night before a potential shoot. So they're all different. So you've got to research who the photographers are you're looking to work with, how they work, and try and figure out for yourself like the best approach to trying to work with them. Try and make it worth their time, that they should want to bring you on, because they're not just going to get you along as on goodwill, because it's quite rare that they've actually got the time. They've got their own stresses, they've got their own worries, they've got their own pressures. And ultimately, if you're going to approach them as an assistant, you need to be offering them value.
Yep. Completely. I tell you what, there is a good point. The AOP do have an assisting membership, but also they do. I'm actually helping them out with one next week. They do assistant speed dating and things like that, where you can basically go in, have a couple of minutes with a photographer, find out what they're after, introduce yourself to them. But they also, obviously, outside of COVID times, they do the assisting summer barbecue. Or is that Direct, I think, who do that? Is that, who am I thinking of? There is a summer barbecue for assistants.
Gripband do one, don't they, as well?
Gripband do one, yep. So there are loads of events where you can network and you can find, and also I know a lot of assistants who are members of these big assisting groups who, if they can't do it, on WhatsApp, and if they can't do a job, they'll put it out to the group and they'll be able to find someone who can, because it's all about passing stuff around.
Yeah, so, the main thing is your level of professionalism, is being like able to communicate. If you can't do a job, if something changes, if there's a problem, knowing how to communicate that with the photographer in good time, so you don't cause them further problems. And also just being able to, getting used to being able to understand the idea of penciling and, holding dates for certain jobs, etc., etc. But I think those are some good resources, and we will link to them as well. So should be able to find them if you go to the website. The show notes will be there. Okay, right. Next question, because we are running out of time.
Final question, because I realise this is now becoming one of the longest podcast episodes ever.
So this is from Steve Bright. I find that when shooting to Capture One with my A7R4, so big, 60 megas. I'm just going to have to reread this.
So Steve shoots with an A7R4, Greg, and the files in it are quite big. They're roughly around 60 megapixels.
Oh, and this is another super tech question.
Yeah, if it's portraits, he's shooting a lot of them. And Capture One sometimes takes a long time to catch up, and you kind of going, oh, God. And we've all found this. When we're tethering, we'll be shooting a load of stuff, and then suddenly it feels like it's crawling a bit, and then it'll feel like the images are taking forever to come off the camera. The first thing I guess you can do, it's very dull, is you can slow down. I obviously understand that's not going to be an option for a lot of these things, but I think, we are, quite snap happy from time to time, and we'll be like, oh, great, cool, brr, done. And the buffer's full, right? So you can kind of just maybe slow down slightly. Another way of doing it is Capture One is fantastic if you break it down into folders in your capture folder. So break it down into shoots. I've found that as soon as it starts to get 150 to 200, maybe 300 images in one folder, it starts slowing down. So I tend to shoot, 30, 40, 50 images per shoot folder, and I'll have everything broken down like that in my session folders, and this really helps. Number 3, sorry, Greg, I've just taken this one. Do you?
No, go for it.
Right. Number 3 is preview size. Check you are using the correct preview size in Capture One for your display. If you are rendering out previews that are twice the resolution of your monitor, obviously that is going to slow down your computer. That's in the preferences. It's in one of the first tabs. You'll be able to see it, and you can then auto regenerate previews at the correct size, and it'll speed everything up a little bit. Number 4, if you are running a preset, for example, and this is something I learned from an assistant, Sam, the other day. Thank you very much, Sam, for this tip. Is if you are running a grain preset, for example, on your images, that is going to slow down the render of the preview, apparently. So that is going to slow down the whole program as well. Number 5, make sure you're using the right cables. Like, it sounds like a silly thing to say, but like, not all cables are created equal. We've talked about this before. I use the Tether Tools USB-C cables. There are other brands, but I've always used those ones. There's never been a problem with them. They're fast, reliable, and just decent cables. Plus, you can see them so you don't trip over them. But, and try to keep... I only use one cable length between me and the computer. I'm not one of these guys to suddenly use 2 of the 4.5 meter things, because I have found the longer the cable, the slower everything tends to go. And I think also, if you're worried, sorry, hang on, let me just have a COVID break. Back in the room. Sorry, I don't have COVID. My asthma. So, Steve, another interesting point is you are using the Sony A7R4. Now, the Sony A7R4 is one of the cameras that can write to the internal memory card as well as sending the image out over the cable to the laptop. So what I do is I always shoot to card as well as tethering, because that creates, I don't know if we've touched on this earlier, but I love backing up and I love creating redundancy. So that creates another copy of the data. So say, for example, there is an issue in transferring the image, or say, for example, you say capture has slowed down and it's taking forever to get the images through, and someone pulls out the cable because they're frustrated with it or it needs a reset or something like that, you still have those images saved to the card. So nothing's lost. It might be odd, but there might be odd, kind of data in the session. For example, you might have a gap where some images didn't transfer through, but you do have the images saved on the card. So for me, careful what process recipes you have selected, because it's always running those. So I have, we've talked about this in the podcast before, I have a watermark preset. So I know it is having to create a different preview for that, so I'm sure it slows it down, and things like that. So just make sure you're not over asking too much of the machine, but also see if your machine is starting to look a bit old. Mine is starting to feel a little bit laggy in general, but I'm holding off because of the new Apple M1 Silicon announcement. So I think that maybe just see if it's due an upgrade. And if it is due an upgrade, maybe just hold off a little bit longer. But I'm sure try some of those tips and let me know how you get on.
Now, does that answer all of the questions there? Because was there a bit at the end about the jumping between previews?
Jumping from previews? Oh, yes, right. Okay, so we're talking about if when you're waiting for images to come in and the client may be looking at the laptop, for example, and you're showing the images come through, and they, say for example you've got one selected and then it instantly selects next capture. You can turn that off in the menu. It just means that it won't auto advance when you're tethering. But also I use remote viewing. I sometimes use it. I can either have a viewer on the iPad, but also you can run the Capture One app, Capture Pilot, which would also mean that they could flick through the shoot on their own time, separate from what you're doing on the machine.
I'd also say, Steve, that the Phase One have got like really good videos on Capture One on tutorials on their website. So have a look at their tethering tutorials, because they should have most information there and tips there as well. Mm-hmm. If Tom didn't manage to answer that, which I'm sure he probably did. There's
a chap on the Mr. Grover, I think it is, on the YouTube channel for Capture One, and there are so many good walkthroughs and tutorials where he runs you through all the tools, and he does it in a really, really good way of they do it with live streams, so then you can rewatch the live stream, and it's interesting hearing people's questions, and he really shows people in depth how it's a really powerful bit of software. But yeah, I'm hoping that helps. And I think is that Greg, it's Santa's sleigh. So I imagine if that's how we were going to end it. How are we going to end this one? We can slowly fade out to bells.
There are further questions, and we will try and answer stuff. Anything we haven't answered, it's possibly because we are planning future episodes, so don't stress. You can reach out to us on the X Negative Instagram with further questions. We will store them up, because we will be doing more of these kind of episodes where we do our facts. We've got to come up with a name for it, haven't we?
Yes.
Greg and Tom give a fact.
Oh, that's very good. I do feel that now we're 19 episodes in, we should have got a few things sorted, and I think that may be one of them.
This will be our 20th.
So now we're 20 episodes in. I really feel...
So yeah, we will be doing further of these, and any of your questions we will store up, put in the doc, so that we can look at them down the line. But also you can reach out to us on our personal Instagrams when we've got time. We're more than happy to kind of respond to people.
Absolutely. Sharing is caring.
Yeah. I guess I don't know how to end it. Can you fade in some sleigh bells? Maybe Bit of Wham.
Don't get me wrong. Our budget's massive for this show. You can hear it. But Wham, that might be a bit of an ask.
Surely there's a cover band called like Spam.
Spam. What, they all dress up in meat? Yeah, I will.
Tins.
Just if we just kind of maybe fade our rambling out, I will just put in something festive.
Okay, good. Well, I can get back to my mince pies and I was going to say my Baileys, but it's not. It's cheap oldie Irish cream.
I mean,
that's how big our budget is.
It's not. That's how big our budget is. But listen, honestly, hand on heart, it's been a really bloody tough year. You've managed to get this far. I'm not talking to you, Greg. I'm sorry. I'm talking to the listeners. Sorry. That made it sound. We looked at each other in the eye as I was saying it. God. No, but honestly, hand on heart, it's been a really bloody tough year for creative, well, every industry, but creative industries have really suffered. And we've not had much support from the government. The industries are going to take a long time to recover. And you've made it this far. You've probably made it through the worst of it. And congratulations. Here's to a much, much better 2021.
If you're listening to the podcast, you're clearly being proactive because you've sorted us out.
That's it, right? But honestly, genuinely, please keep listening in 2021 and the happiest of Christmases. And, I'm sure we all can't wait to put this year behind us. And, next year's going to be better. I do genuinely think that. I think that everyone is going to be keen to put this year behind, and I think that will lead a bit of a bounce back. And I'm just, I'm not just saying that. I do genuinely feel quite optimistic. So with that, have an awesome Christmas, a great New Year. Drink responsibly.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us, and we'll see you in the new one.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to find out more or to see the show notes, please go over to exposednegative.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at xnegative. It's very imaginative. And if you want to email us, you can email us at info@exposednegative.com. I know, how did we come up with that? So hope you enjoy the podcast. Any suggestions, feedback, or general harassment, please send it in. And we'll catch you on the next one.